Edwardian England, a world of elegant architecture, groundbreaking inventions, and a society fascinated by ghosts. This was a time when motorcars, telegraphs, and advancements in medicine dazzled the public, yet the fascination with the supernatural remained strong. People turned to séances, mediums, and ghostly tales, seeking comfort, intrigue, and a touch of fear amid the excitement of progress. Apparitions, phantom figures, and unexplained phenomena, these were not mere stories, they were experiences that haunted and shaped the Edwardian imagination. From the haunted rooms of an intriguing museum to the spectral echoes of an Edwardian school, from ghostly whispers in a grand manor house to the chilling corridors of a haunted hotel. Today we'll uncover the ghostly secrets, the séances, and the stories of Edwardian England, a society that raced boldly into the future whilst never letting go of its fascination with the unknown. Welcome to the Ghosts of Edwardian England. Christchurch Mansion is a magnificent Tudor house in Ipswich, Suffolk. This treasured building was constructed around 1548 by Edmund Withypole, a wealthy merchant, moneylender and politician. The property belonged to various noble families throughout its history, but today the building is utilised as a museum. The interior rooms are preserved as past inhabitants would have known them, complete with original items such as furniture, fine clothing, and children's toys. The museum holds an impressive collection of paintings by renowned local artists, including John Constable and Thomas Gainsborough. But this museum is also home to at least 5 ghosts. Christchurch Mansion, long thought of as one of Ipswich's most haunted houses, is built on the site of the Holy Trinity Priory, founded in the 12th century, which was dissolved by King Henry VIII. Queen Elizabeth I visited twice, and Charles II visited Viscount Hereford and even played bowls here. In the upstairs picture gallery, the apparition of a beautiful young woman, known as the Edwardian Lady, said to be in her late 20s or early 30s, has been seen on a number of occasions by visitors and museum staff. She wears a long, straight Edwardian dress, and her hair is elegantly piled up. But she is not alone. She is witnessed holding hands, dancing and laughing with 2 small children. The ghostly children and the Phantom Lady are said to be playing Ring-a-Ring-a-Roses or a similar child's dance. They make no sound, but those who see the group say they are happy spirits, laughing and leaning back in glee. An elderly man, an artist, who witnessed the ghosts many years ago told the staff, "If I could capture that scene, I would sell 1,000 copies." On the same floor are rooms containing original artefacts from a lost era, children's toys and games, a music room, dolls' houses, and the learning room. Could it be that the children are drawn to these wonderful items that meant so much to them and gave them great joy in life? Is the Edwardian Lady their mother or perhaps a governess? We may never know, but the Edwardian Lady and the 2 children seem to enjoy returning here to laugh, play and to dance. In 2022, the local press reported one guest named Sophie Davis's rather unnerving encounter. She stated, "I was at Christchurch Mansion on a date with my now ex, and it was near closing time. We were on the 2nd floor, near the children's nursery, and I felt something pull my coat down from the hem, as if a small child was trying to get my attention. I turned around and no one was there. My ex asked if I was okay and I brushed it off. When we left, I told him what happened, and he told me of the 2 children and the nanny who supposedly haunt the mansion. Downstairs, a phantom woman from an earlier time period makes an appearance. She is dressed in a floor-length, wide grey gown. Known as the Victorian lady or the lady in grey, she is usually seen rushing past visitors in the lower floors or hallways. She appears, passes by, then vanishes. Sometimes she startles visitors who have just entered the building, who barely have time to register what they've seen before the woman disappears. She has been seen on several occasions walking through a closed glass door, and some guests have even felt the swish of her long gown as she races past. One security guard saw the grey lady heading upstairs, going into a room, and another heard the harpsichord being played. When he rushed up to investigate, there was no one there. Her identity remains a mystery, but it is thought that she was a member of the Fonerow family, who lived in the mansion from 1735 until 1892. Could this be the apparition of Elizabeth Cobbold, an English writer, artist and philanthropist? In 1791, she married John Cobbold, a wealthy brewer whose wife had died, and he had 14 children from this marriage. Together they had 7 more, totalling 21 children in their household. If this is not the apparition of Elizabeth, it's quite possible it's one of her descendants. A young servant girl dressed in either Edwardian or late Victorian uniform is sometimes seen wandering the impressive hallways, but why she haunts is unclear. Sometimes described as a restless spirit, those who try to make contact with her say the young lady passed away in the house under mysterious circumstances. We know the mansion employed a number of servants with their own wing, complete with attic quarters close to the kitchen. Whoever this poor girl is, she seems to be stuck between this world and the next, her restless soul unable to find peace after a possible violent and untimely demise. Visitor Gem Victoria had her own experience and related this to the local press. She reported, "My sister, 2 young children at the time, and I were in Christchurch Mansion, and we were looking at the big doll's house there. We suddenly heard drums in the next room, so my sister and I looked at each other thinking the same thing, and followed the sound into the music room, where there was in fact drums. We've never left a building so quickly. My 2 children often still bring this up." But Christchurch Mansion is also home to some strange poltergeist activity. An assistant at the museum, Steve Parks, witnessed a painting rising from the ground and flying 6 feet across the room. Paintings have somehow overnight turned themselves around on the wall, and in the gift shop, books and objects fall on the floor for no reason and are sometimes thrown by an unseen entity. A security guard who was using the lavatory was shocked to hear the sound of a party in full swing in the main hall. He was terrified because he knew there shouldn't be anyone present in the house. Eventually, he plucked up the courage to investigate, took a deep breath, and threw open the door. There was no one in there. Belper is a town on the River Derwent, around 7 miles north of the city of Derby. Originally a centre for the nail-making industry since the Middle Ages, Belper expanded during the early Industrial Revolution to become one of the first mill towns with the establishment of several textile mills. In the heart of Belper stands a vast Edwardian building that once rang with the laughter of children and the stern voices of teachers. But today it's remembered for something far darker. Shadowy figures in empty corridors, screams in the dead of night, and a ghostly child. This is the story of Strutt's Edwardian School, one of the UK's most haunted educational buildings. The Herbert Strutt School was founded in 1909 by George Herbert Strutt, a wealthy industrialist and philanthropist whose family dominated Belper's textile trade. He was a direct descendant of Jedediah Strutt, a leading Derby industrialist who was one of the founders of the modern factory system. The Strutt family transformed the town from a small hamlet of cottage industry to an industrial mill town, affecting the lives of thousands of workers. Herbert Strutt, in an act of philanthropy, was granted permission to provide a school for the town in March 1907. The site he chose for the new school was opposite the town's grim workhouse, Babington House, a daily reminder of the stark divisions in the early 20th century. Costing around £20,000 to build, the school was officially opened on May 7th, 1909, by the 9th Duke of Devonshire himself. The school wasn't just any building. It was designed in the grand Edwardian style, with high ceilings, wide corridors and classrooms filled with light. The first headmaster, W. Tunnicliffe, presided over the school from February 1909 until his retirement in 1936. Over the decades, it transformed from an elementary school into a grammar school, and later a middle and primary school. By 2008, the classrooms finally fell silent and the site became a community centre. For over a century, whispers of strange activity have clung to Strutt's Edwardian School. From staff, pupils and now ghost hunters, reports tell of footsteps echoing in deserted halls, voices calling from nowhere, and doors that slam shut without cause. The most famous apparition is a child named Alice, a young girl seen wandering the South Quadrant corridor. Witnesses describe her as filthy, dirty, dressed in black, her feet fading through the floor, probably because the floor height has changed over time. Her screams are said to echo through the building, and due to her appearance, she is often nicknamed Black Alice. Is she a former pupil who died at an early age, from a deadly illness, or could she have died in an accident? In September 1910, a local girl aged 2, Alice Wilmot, was killed instantly on the road when she was struck by a horse pulling a dray loaded with flour. She was discovered beneath the dray, between the wheels, and had sustained a fatal head injury. Does her sad, mournful spectre return? Is Alice linked to the workhouse opposite? Many believe she is. We know that there were several terrible child deaths in this institution over the years. Perhaps we will never know young Alice's identity. The apparitions of 2 different men dressed in fine Edwardian tailoring also haunt the classrooms and corridors of this mysterious location. One is believed to be George Herbert Strutt, who was born in 1854. George Herbert Strutt was the last of the Strutts to reside in Belper, living at Makeney Hall near Milford. An academic man, educated at Magdalen College, Oxford, Strutt not only founded the school, but he paid for an extension in 1914, the Strutt Memorial Wing, which allowed the school to expand rapidly. This addition included science labs and extra classrooms, giving Belper one of the best equipped schools in Derbyshire at the time. His wish was to provide a modern, state-of-the-art education for Belper's children, particularly at a time when compulsory schooling was still evolving. George Herbert also funded the public swimming baths in Belper, which opened in 1910, another major investment in community health and recreation, and in 1909 he presented land for the Belper River Gardens, creating a leisure space for townsfolk along the River Derwent. He was known for his generosity to his workers and the town, and his donations reflected a continuation of the family's long-standing paternalism towards Belper. But he was most proud of the school, and perhaps that's why his apparition, lifelike and dressed in his sartorial splendour, still visits this listed Edwardian landmark which still bears his name. George Herbert Strutt eventually left Derbyshire and spent much of his later life on his estates in Scotland, where he died of pneumonia in May 1928, aged 74. The Strutt family grave is located at Belper Cemetery. The other ghostly gentleman is believed to be the school's first head teacher, Mr. William Wright Tunnicliffe, who still watches over his office. He was appointed in February 1909 when the school had just 84 pupils and remained as the head teacher until his retirement in 1936. He was vital in establishing the school's expectations and policies. For example, he initiated the policy of insisting that all pupils remain in school until the age of 16, an idea well before its time, which undoubtedly contributed to the school's academic success. Under his leadership, the school succeeded in sending many pupils on to higher education, demonstrating Tunnicliffe's maintenance of high academic standards. Mr. Tunnicliffe died only 1 year after his retirement in a nursing home in Loughborough, aged 66. A vigil was held at St. Peter's Church the night before his burial at Belper Cemetery, with 6 members of staff and 6 senior boys keeping watch. Perhaps his apparition returns to the school, a place he loved, where his dedication and leadership shaped the lives of thousands of young people. His apparition is seen and sensed most strongly in the library and the old headmaster's office, and some people sense an oppressive atmosphere in this area. Another member of the Strutt family is also thought to make his presence known at the school. The founder, George Herbert Strutt, had 2 children. One of his sons, Lieutenant Anthony Herbert Strutt, died in Belgium during the First World War. He is commemorated on the family grave in Belper. But it was George Herbert's second son, Arthur Strutt, who inherited the businesses and the Scottish estates after George Herbert's death, where he lived with his wife, a New Zealander, Patricia Keeble. Arthur Strutt lived a quiet life in the shadow of his father's great philanthropy. But in 1977, his story took a chilling turn. One day, Arthur simply vanished. No trace, no explanation. His family searched, but couldn't find him. In 1982, foresters working deep in the woods around half a mile from the Strutt estate in Scotland stumbled upon a grim discovery. The skeleton of a man, still dressed in the very clothes Arthur was last seen wearing. It was him. The cause of death, a mystery. Some whispered it was an accident. Others believed it was something far darker. After his death, poltergeist activity began at Strutt's school. Heavy doors began to slam shut on their own, and some visitors witnessed the handles on doors rattle and turn by unseen hands. The sounds of footsteps echoed through the empty halls, and classrooms became alive with whispers and cries when nobody was inside. One of the most common experiences is the sound of children, laughter, running footsteps, the scraping of chairs. Paranormal groups have even reported whispers and piano music playing faintly in the darkness. Skeptics argue that most of Strutt's hauntings can be explained by its age and architecture. Old stone walls creak, wind whistles through the windows, and echoes bounce across the long corridors. Add to that the power of suggestion, and a late-night ghost hunt can quickly turn into a terrifying experience. Yet, for those who have seen Black Alice's shadow or heard the headmaster's voice, no rational explanation will ever feel enough. Strutt's Edwardian School is more than bricks and mortar. It's a century of memory, discipline, laughter, and perhaps tragedy. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is certain. The echoes of the past still linger at Strutt's Edwardian School, Belper. In the quiet Surrey countryside stands Clandon House, a Palladian mansion built for power and prestige, constructed in the 1730s and commissioned by Thomas Onslow, the second Baron Onslow. Once part-owned by the crusading Knights Templar, the estate was sold to the Onslow family on the eve of the Civil War in England. The Onslows were a powerful political family, producing several MPs, peers and 3 speakers of the House of Commons. Designed by Giacomo Leoni, an Italian architect who created a fusion of Baroque and Palladian style, symmetrical, classical, with a striking, gleaming white, double-height marble hall at its heart. The house quickly became a symbol of the Onslow family's wealth and status, and was built with a suite of opulent ground floor rooms beautifully decorated in exuberant Baroque style. With its dramatic entrance hall, the property was regarded as an architectural masterpiece. But despite its beauty, Clandon House had a problem. In the late 19th century, one of the tenants refused to continue to live there and demanded the termination of his lease from the owner, Lord Onslow, claiming the property was haunted. He complained. Every night, 3 hours before the dawn, a lady dressed in a long robe of cream-coloured satin was seen walking across the garden, weeping and holding a kitchen implement in her hand. A number of servants dutifully challenged her, and several shots were even fired from a pistol at her. The bullets disappeared into the castle, lodged in oak doors and the granite walls. They stood only to watch this mysterious apparition walk straight through a wall and disappear. More than 20 people, described as well worthy of belief, had witnessed this phantom and had indeed opposed her progress in the house. Who could this mysterious woman be? She was not just witnessed by tenants and servants, but also seen by Lord Onslow, as well as his solicitor. Some are convinced that this melancholy apparition is Elizabeth Knight, born in 1692, and once the Lady of Clandon House. She was the daughter of John Knight, a wealthy merchant, and the niece and heir of Charles Knight, who was a plantation owner and slave trader in Jamaica. Her fortune, including her inheritance, was substantial. When she married Thomas Onslow in November 1708, aged 15, at St Paul's Cathedral, she brought an estimated £70,000 to the marriage, the equivalent of several million in today's money. This wealth played a significant role in funding the rebuilding of Clandon Park into a grand mansion. In April 1731, and for reasons we may never understand, it is believed that she entered the lake and never returned. She left her husband and 3 sons who made it to adulthood. In 1897, a visitor witnessed a ghostly female dressed in a sumptuous ball gown walking up the stairs. The figure just evaporated before the shocked visitor's eyes. On another occasion, the ghost of Elizabeth appeared in every room before disappearing through the back wall. During World War I, the house was used as a hospital for injured servicemen, and Elizabeth made an appearance in the Palladio room in front of the wounded soldiers. But in Edwardian times, its drawing rooms were not just filled with aristocratic chatter, they echoed with the whispers of the dead. At this time, the house was occupied by William Hillier Onslow and his wife Florence Coulston Gardner, Lady William Onslow. Lady Onslow, the mistress of the house, was part of the social elite, but was also fascinated by spiritualism, which was very fashionable among Edwardian aristocrats. Spiritualism is a religious and philosophical movement that began in the mid-19th century in the United States and became hugely popular in Victorian and Edwardian Britain. Fundamental to the movement is the belief that the human spirit survives death and continues to exist in another plane or world, and that the living can communicate with the spirits of the dead, often through a medium. Author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a passionate advocate of spiritualism, and in 1881 he attended a lecture on the subject. By the time of his death in 1930, he'd become one of the most well-known proponents of spiritualism and claimed to have made contact with notable literary figures, including Charles Dickens, Oscar Wilde, Lord Byron and George Eliot. In 1920, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle met the legendary magician Harry Houdini during his tour of England. The two became friends, but their beliefs couldn't have been more different. Conan Doyle was convinced in the power of the supernatural. Houdini was a fierce skeptic, determined to expose fraud in the spiritualist movement. In 1920, during Houdini's US vaudeville tour, the decision was made to hold a séance between Doyle and Houdini in Atlantic City. Doyle wanted Houdini to participate in a séance to test spiritualist claims, particularly Doyle's hope of contacting deceased loved ones. Houdini, a sceptical participant, agreed to observe and engage in the meeting. Houdini observed what he considered to be mediumistic tricks, raps and table movements. Doyle interpreted some of the movements as potentially genuine, but Houdini publicly dismissed the séances as trickery. This Atlantic City séance is thought by many to be the start of tension between the two men. In 1922, Conan Doyle arranged another séance, claiming that Houdini's late mother wanted to send a message from beyond the grave. Conan Doyle's wife, Jean, in a hypnotic trance, produced a long message in English using automatic writing, supposedly from Houdini's mother. But Houdini knew the truth. His mother barely spoke English. It was trickery. Shocked and disillusioned, he publicly denounced spiritualism, and their friendship ended. At Clandon House, Lady Onslow hosted several séances in the Green Drawing Room between 1905 and 1910, with private mediums, and attended by members of high society curious about the supernatural. Like many of her circle, she invited mediums such as Ava Goodrich Freer to Clandon House, determined to pierce the veil between the living and the departed. In the green drawing room, with the curtains drawn and candles aglow, séances were held beneath chandeliers that twinkled in the candlelight. Guests sat at the round table, hands linked together, attempting to create a circle of energy believed to focus psychic forces. The table was sometimes adorned with planchettes, bells, crystals, and even musical instruments to attract the deceased. The medium began to speak, calling on the spirits, politely yet firmly. We summon the presence of those who have passed from this world, those who watch over us from beyond the veil. Spirits of our beloved departed, come forth and make your presence known. We invite you with reverence and love, asking that your guidance, messages and signs of comfort be revealed to us this evening. The guests were silent as the medium opened the channels. Would the restless dead respond? During one séance in particular, faint raps began to echo across the polished oak table, carrying with them an unnatural chill felt by all the participants. One man claimed to have felt the sensation of an icy cold phantom hand brush against his own. Shadows flickered in the candlelight, and several glimpsed a tall, indistinct figure gliding across the green drawing room before vanishing. One lady trembled and burst into tears. She had just heard her late brother's voice murmuring from the dark corners of the room, and that ghostly figure, she was certain, was him. To the believers, these were unmistakable messages from the other side. To the sceptics, only the staged illusions of Edwardian theatrics. But even they could not ignore the cold that lingered long after the séance was drawn to a close. But there are other ghostly residents at Clandon House. The strong smell of flowers permeates the attic room, where a maid died very unexpectedly. In the grounds, a male figure with considerable facial hair sometimes walks with purpose, and a lady, dressed in black, startles unsuspecting guests. Clandon House kept its secrets, but for a time, it seems, in the heart of Edwardian England, this stately home became a doorway between the living and the dead. Sadly, the property was gutted by a devastating electrical fire in 2015, which started in the basement and quickly reached the roof. One of the footballs kicked across no man's land on the first day of the Battle of the Somme in 1916 was among the thousands of historic items destroyed. But the 6 Victoria crosses thought to have been destroyed were replicas, with the originals being held in a bank vault. The National Trust announced that a number of the principal rooms are to be restored to the original 18th century designs. But the question is, will the ghost return to this once magnificent mansion? In the heart of Warwickshire, not far from Stratford-upon-Avon, stands one of England's most beautiful and haunted hotels. Ettington Park is a neo-Gothic mansion with fairy tale turrets and surrounded by dark trees. It was built as a family home for the Shirley family, prominent landowners, politicians and benefactors in Warwickshire. Their crest can be seen above the fireplace in the oldest Tudor part of the house. They were closely tied to the Church of England and funded local religious and civic projects, but they were not to be messed with. Legend tells that one of the Shirleys, provoked in an argument, struck the head of his adversary and nailed it to the oak front door of the property as a warning to others. Today it operates as a beautiful hotel, but behind the elegance and luxury, guests and staff tell stories of ghosts that have lingered here for generations. In 1963, film director Robert Wise adapted Shirley Jackson's novel, The Haunting of Hill House, into a superbly atmospheric and unnerving cinematic thriller named The Haunting. For the exterior shots, Wise wanted a building that looked imposing, eccentric and authentically Gothic, and he chose Ettington Park. During filming, actor Russ Tamblyn had a strange encounter in the hotel's grounds. Unable to sleep, he went for a walk and was struck as if a slab of ice had been placed on his head, the cold spreading throughout his body. He was convinced that something rather than someone was watching him, and he raced back inside to his room. Later, in 1980, the Norman chapel in the grounds was also used in the filming of The Watcher in the Woods, starring Betty Davis and David McCallum. The land around Ettington has been in the hands of the Shirley family since before the Norman conquest. The current mansion was remodelled in the mid-19th century into the neo-Gothic building we see today. Through the years, it has been a private residence, a nursing home, and even used as a training camp during the Second World War. The most famous apparition here is known as Lady Emma, the Lady in White. Thought to be a member of the Shirley family, she is described as a translucent figure, gliding through the corridors and along the veranda, always dressed in a long, flowing white gown. She was witnessed in the main hall, where she walked through a stone wall, which may suggest she predates the Victorian remodelling of the mid-1850s. Some believe she was a governess attached to the Shirley family in the early 1900s. She is seen most often at dusk, slipping silently through walls and doorways, particularly the Tower Suite and the Stour corridors. She was seen by a member of staff in 1975, who saw her gliding along the hallway beside the arched entrance before melting into a solid wooden door. Another apparition haunts the great stone staircase and the library. The Grey Lady is said to drift at its foot, a misty, half-transparent figure who is usually seen in the winter. Rumours swirl that she died in a fall here many years ago. Others believe she is connected to a servant girl named Mary, who quarrelled with the squire, and she tumbled to her death on these very steps. But some are convinced she was pushed. Visitors often report sudden cold spots and the unnerving sense of being watched as they ascend the steps. She is sometimes seen in the Oak Room, an area of the hotel where service dogs become distressed. Another well-known ghost at Ettington Park Hotel is the Edwardian man, and he has been seen many times. One of the hotel's night managers swore he repeatedly saw a man wearing a fine Edwardian three-piece suit made of dark tweed, accompanied by his shadow-like dog strolling calmly into the library. Both would vanish without a trace. Guests have also seen them crossing reception before disappearing into thin air. Who the man was, no one knows, but his loyal hound is said to linger by his side, even in death. The disembodied voices of men talking and laughing can be heard in the library when it is empty, and the sounds of billiard balls clink, the echo of a game from the past, and the pungent smell of pipe tobacco permeates the air here. In the conservatory, staff have reported seeing an elderly lady dressed in a black Victorian gown who appears and then fades away. On many occasions, her footsteps have been heard walking back and forth across the floor in this location. Close to the ruined chapel, others have seen a silent figure in grey robes, perhaps a monk or a priest. Not all of Ettington Park's spirits are adults. 2 young boys dressed in clothes of the Edwardian era are said to have drowned in the River Stour on the estate itself. Their laughter, and sometimes their cries, have been heard echoing across the grounds. Some guests have even seen 2 small figures darting in and out of the trees. One guest at the hotel reported the sound of a child sobbing outside on the lawn, and when he looked out of his window, he saw the 2 phantoms gazing longingly into the river. Records do not indicate that 2 boys of the Shirley family died in this manner, and it's possible that the 2 boys were trespassing on the land to hunt or to fish. Shirley children were alive in or around Ettington Park during Edwardian times, most obviously Evelyn Charles Shirley, who was born in 1889, and it's possible these boys could have been his friends. But he died in 1956 in Ireland, leaving a wife and 2 grown-up children. Beyond these apparitions, Ettington Park has no shortage of paranormal activity. At the reception desk, staff witnessed a lit candle that once lifted from the mantelpiece and floated across the room on Christmas Eve. In the library, one book, a copy of St. Ronan's Well by Sir Walter Scott, has been lifted off the shelf and thrown to the floor time and time again, always opening at a page containing a curse. In the great drawing room, a barefooted lady dressed in an Edwardian evening gown stands next to the bay window on the right-hand side, and the doors and curtains have opened and closed in this room by an invisible hand. Visitors describe doors opening on their own, curtains moving, icy patches of air, and the feeling of their face being touched or stroked whilst they sleep in guest rooms. Ettington Park Hotel has been called one of the most haunted hotels in England. Its halls echo with the footsteps of residents, servants, children, and even spectral animals. Perhaps these are simply stories born of imagination in a Gothic mansion. Or perhaps the past is never truly gone, and the ghosts of Ettington Park are still checking in. I hope you enjoyed these stories from Edwardian England, and I've always found this to be a very fascinating time in history. And today I have some extra stories for you, some royal gossip, some Edwardian artefacts, and a book recommendation that I think you'll really like, and a menu. I have covered some other Edwardian stories elsewhere on the channel. Brooklands Racetrack springs to mind, which opened in 1907. And also some of the stories connected with 50 Berkeley Square were Edwardian in origin. Also the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool. There's quite a lot of Edwardian stories connected there. Some of you will remember the video I made about Warwick Castle. And in Edwardian times there were all sorts of séances and attempts to contact the dead at Warwick Castle. Anne Greville, the 4th Countess of Warwick, contacted mediums and held séances in the Kenilworth bedroom. And there were all sorts of documents linked to that. Also Daisy, the 5th Countess of Warwick, she was also busy with séances at the castle, attended by all sorts of society figures. And she was also having an affair with Edward VII when he was the Prince of Wales in the 1880s. Daisy was one of his many mistresses, but she stood out because of her wit and her charm and the way she could entertain and flatter the future king. She was involved with other prominent men as well, and she was quite outspoken, and later in her life she became a socialist and a campaigner for workers' rights, which really shocked high society at that time. And after Edward VII's death, Daisy was struggling a bit for money, and she nearly published her memoirs all about her affair with Edward VII and other men. She was persuaded to withdraw them from publication. Effectively, the royal family, desperate to avoid embarrassment, paid her to keep them unpublished. And this cemented the aura of scandal around both her and Warwick Castle. I think it's fair to say that Queen Victoria had a complicated relationship with her son. Victoria adored her first child, Princess Vicky, but when Bertie was born in 1841, she quickly judged him as slow and lazy compared to his bright sister, and she often wrote that Bertie was stupid or naughty, and she despaired of him academically. And Victoria wrote about him in various diaries and letters, and she really didn't mince her words. She wrote, "Bertie is very weak, frivolous, and deficient in energy and stability. He is backward in intellect and most helpless in every way. Bertie is a poor creature, not at all clever, and I do not think he will ever be fit to reign." So, pretty low opinion of Bertie there. And some people think that this is why he lived quite a hedonistic lifestyle, because his mum was quite critical of him. But we have to accept he was the Prince of Wales. He was from a privileged background. He was going to live a good life, however that looked. But when he was 19, Bertie was caught having an affair with an actress, Nellie Clifton, whilst he was training in the army. And Prince Albert travelled to see him to really give him a telling off. And Albert died shortly afterwards of typhoid fever, although some historians think he may have had stomach cancer or kidney disease. But Victoria blamed Bertie for Albert's death, believing the stress of his misconduct had effectively killed his father. Albert was only 42 when he died in 1861, and Victoria went into deep mourning and became extremely withdrawn. Victoria never let him forget that she held him partly responsible for Albert's death. She wrote, "I never can or shall look at him without a shudder." Now, we all know that Edward VII was well known for his many affairs, and my understanding is that if you were chosen to be one of Edward's ladies, it was sort of seen as a badge of honour. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this lady, Lady Brooke. I had not heard of her before. She's quite an interesting figure. She was born in 1854 into an Anglo-Irish noble family, and her mother, Lady Olivia Fitzpatrick, tried to seduce Prince Albert, but it didn't go anywhere. But Patsy had an affair with the Prince of Wales when she was 16, and when it was discovered, she got married off to an MP called William Cornwallis West, who was more than twice her age, and they lived at Ruthin Castle and had 3 children. And Ruthin Castle is haunted by a grey lady, amongst other ghosts, who is believed to be a servant girl who was wrongly executed, and I will cover Ruthin Castle in a full video one day. So let's just have a look at some of my things. These are my 2 Queen Victoria coins, and you can see that the portraits differ because they're from different times in her reign and that she looks to the left on the coins. The coin on the right, as you look at it, the smaller coin, is from 1839, whereas the larger coin, which is a 1 penny, is from 1899. And here are my 2 Edward VII coins, and you can see that he is facing to the right. And these coins date back to 1902 and 1907, and they're pretty clear. They're not that well worn. And on the evening of the 6th of May 1910, Edward VII died in his bed, aged 68, at Buckingham Palace. And his final words apparently were, "Well, it is all over, but I think I have done my duty." Edward VII had a huge funeral in May 1910, and it was attended by kings, princes, heads of state from all around the world. And really, it was the last great display of European royal unity before World War I. And his death marked the symbolic end of the Edwardian age, which had been glittering but fragile. And then, of course, his son acceded to the throne, that's George V. And you can see that on his coin he looks to the left. And he saw a ghost on the 11th of July 1881 off the coast of Australia. He was on a Royal Naval ship and they saw the Flying Dutchman. It was all catalogued on the ship, and you can find out about that in one of my videos called The Ghosts of the Sea, which was a very early video that I made a long time ago. So George died in 1936 and his son, Edward VIII, ascended to the throne, and he messed everything up, including the coins. I'm sure you know that Edward VIII abdicated in the end, but on his coins he was due to look to the right because his father had looked to the left. But that didn't happen. So in December of 1936, Edward VIII abdicated, and his coins were due to be produced on the 1st of January 1937, and no coins for Edward VIII ever made it into UK circulation, but the Royal Mint was ready to go with them, and they had all the machinery ready to produce these coins. So right after the abdication, Edward VIII requested that a set of coins be minted for him. But George VI refused. That's his brother who went on to be king. He refused because the coins had never been issued and had not passed through the royal proclamation process. They were not deemed to be official, and that's why he said no. But the protocol of the monarch facing left, right like that goes back to Charles II. And along comes the rather vain Edward VIII, and he insists that he wants to face left because he thinks he's better looking, that's his favoured side. How vain was Edward VIII? And when King George came to the throne, his coins faced left, as if Edward VIII had faced right. So we were back to the traditional protocol. I just wanted to recommend this book to you, The Ship of Dreams, The Sinking of the Titanic and the End of the Edwardian Era. And it's by Gareth Russell, who's a great writer. I really have enjoyed several of his books now. And this was a great book. I read it on the Queen Mary too, when we were going to New York, and I've got to be honest, it was perhaps not the ideal read while you're at sea. I'll just have a look at the back with you. When the Titanic sank, so did the Edwardian age that created it. In this brilliantly original history, Gareth Russell recasts a tragedy we think we know to explore an era of seismic change. And it really does that. That's a very accurate way to describe this book. You can get it on Kindle and it's also available on Audible, but the title is slightly different on Audible. Okay, let's have a look at a menu. On the 13th of July 1905, the King and the Queen opened Dock Number 9 at Salford Docks, part of the Manchester Ship Canal, and I believe they went on to have lunch in a rather grand hotel which is sadly not there anymore, but it was called the Queen's Hotel in Manchester, and this is the menu from that lunch. And it strikes me with this menu that if you put the word royal or a reference to the royal family in the names of any of these dishes, then that passes and that's good enough. So we've got soup and then a fish course with some smoked salmon and cucumber. One of the dishes there is named after Queen Alexandra. Roast beef named after Edward VII. Roast lamb named after Windsor. And then there's chicken pies, mashed potato, new potato, all sorts. It's a very comprehensive menu. Looks all very, very nice. And then I've just got a few little postcards for you. This one is from 1907. It's not the easiest postcard to read, so forgive me if I make mistakes, but I'll do my best. This is a photo of my principal room. I have 3 others. 3 of the junior teachers are at the end. We leave on Wednesday next for Kerry and expect to stay a month. I am sure Kent is lovely now. Love to all. So there we go, we've got 3 junior teachers at the back there. And I always look at these pictures and think, what did those children go on to do with their lives? Who did they become? Were they affected by World War I? And then I just have this rather intriguing postcard. It's not quite Edwardian, but I'm going to include it. When I look at that picture, I think it looks a bit like it's from a film. Is it from a film? Does anybody know? But it's the message on the back that I think is really something. To my darling future wife, from her ever-loving future husband. And that's it. We don't know anything about these people, who they were, did they get married, did they have a family, were they happy? It's a mystery from 1919. So that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like, subscribe and press the hype button. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys.